Hello, Chud Saviet, if that's how you say it. I'm not really sure. I was going to try to make this a YouTube video for my Blender channel, but when I got into it, I realized that it's actually a lot more involved than I was expecting due to a glitch. Not necessarily a glitch with Blender, but just kind of a glitch with computer science in general, specifically having to do with floating point numbers. And if you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. But basically, there's a thing that makes it trickier than I was expecting. And as such, I don't think it's a good fit for a YouTube video because unless you have this very specific need and you're willing to invest a lot of time, it doesn't make sense. But basically, to recap, we're trying to take an equirectangular photograph and map it onto a sphere and then convert it into coordinates that look like this. And we're going to be able to do it, but it's not straightforward. And so I'm going to use this equirectangular that I took outside of my house in Brooklyn. Okay, so I'm going to go slow and explain everything I'm doing in Blender. I'm coming from the standpoint that I assume you know nothing about Blender, right? Because this is like a very generic tutorial that hopefully anybody could follow, even if they've never used Blender before. And the other thing is it's very hot in New York right now, so I have my AC on and I'm using RTX Voice. Sometimes RTX Voice will have audio glitches, so hopefully that doesn't happen in this video, but if it does, I apologize. All right, so if you open up Blender, I have the newest version installed here, 2.93, and two things to note here. First, I'm going to explain all the buttons I'm pushing. I cannot get the buttons to show up on screen. There's a glitch with the plugin for the buttons to show, so I'm just going to say what I'm pushing on my keyboard. And the other thing is I'm using a full keyboard with number pad and with a mouse. This can be done on a laptop, but I can't help you there because I never use Blender with a laptop. But if you go into Preferences and you go into Input, there's this option for Emulate 3-button mouse, which people tell me is good for laptops because you don't need to have a scroll wheel. So you just use Alt key plus the left mouse, but it changes some other things too. So be careful because I'm going to be using the Alt key for some stuff in here. And if you have this option on a laptop, it'll overwrite that Alt key and then it's not going to work. So, but you can use Blender with the laptop, but I'm using it on a desktop with an actual mouse and with an actual keyboard. The thing that's interesting about the keyboard is, let's say, I'll explain what I'm doing later, but let's say we add a monkey, right? If I want to see the front side of the monkey, I push 1 on my number pad. If I push 7, I see the top. If I push 3, I see the side. It's really easy to get to these viewpoints with a number pad. If you have a laptop that doesn't have a number pad, then that's also makes things more difficult. I think there's some way to do it visually, but I've been a Blender user for, like I said, almost 20 years, or over 20 years at this point. So I don't even know how to do it in the non-keyboard way at this point. It's just muscle memory. All right, let's just get to it. So I'm going to push 7 on the number pad to put my view in the top mode. And then there's also this little cursor thing, which sometimes it might be somewhere else. If you push Shift C, like a capital C or whatever, puts it back at the center. And this thing is basically where you're going to insert stuff. So if that thing's over here, and then I go to Add Mesh Cube, it adds it where that thing is. But if I push Shift C, it puts it back at the center. And then if I go to Add Mesh UV Sphere, which is what we want, then it'll be added in the center. So yeah, you push Shift C, and then you go to this Add menu, and then you add the sphere. All right, so what we want to do now is get the texture on the surface of the sphere. Now, the way that works in Blender is that you select the object, right? It has the outline around it. I'm using a custom theme, so I have like a blue outline. Yours will probably be orange. But you go to the Materials button down here, create a new material, and then what we're going to do is we're going to wire the texture to the surface. Now, this is just another one of those reasons why this tutorial is a little bit advanced, because we're going to jump right into the node editor. All right, so if you click on this and you choose vertical split, It gives you this line thing. And then we can split that window there, make it a little bit bigger. So you just like right click on the edge and choose your split. And then in this menu, you can choose a different window. So right now we have 2 3D viewports, but we can choose other things, and we're going to choose the shader editor. All right, we can hide this little menu thing on the right side by, yeah, I don't even know how to do it with the UI. I just push N and it goes away. Okay, so that's N on the keyboard to toggle this menu. We don't need it. Also, one thing to note is if your mouse is over the 3D viewport, N will toggle it on that one. But if your mouse is over this one, N will toggle it here. Okay, again, you'll have different colors. I'm using a custom theme. So you'll have these nodes, but they'll look different colored. Okay, so we have this material selected, and we're seeing these nodes. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to delete this one. Just make sure it's selected, push X, and it's deleted. Then we're going to go to Add, Shader, and then we're going to choose Emission. And we're going to wire this to the surface. All right. If we go back to the 3D viewport, make this a little bit bigger again, and you push Z, you can choose Material Preview, and we see that it's a solid white sphere. So that's pretty close to what we want. But now what we want to do is add a texture. So we'll go to Add, Texture, Image Texture. All right. Then I just have to get my folder ready. All right. Click the Open button. Paste in the folder where your picture is located, and then choose the one that you want. So I said I was going to do in front of my house in Brooklyn. I think this one's fine. We'll open that up, and then take the color from the texture and put that into the emission. And when you do that, you see that now we have the correct effect working on this sphere in Blender, just like the video on Reddit showed. So that's set up correctly. And so what we want to do is we now want to make a second sphere, but we want to make a second sphere that has this layout and transfer the texture from this sphere to that second sphere. Okay, so what we're going to do is select this sphere in this outliner over here. It says sphere. We'll call this, we'll just call this sphere 1 default because it's just the way that Blender makes a sphere by default. And then now there's these several icons here. If you click this filter menu, you can turn on or off different icons. Just click the one that has an eyeball. You might not have all of the same icons because mine has different ones by default. I set up my Blender the way that I like it. I think you have the eye by default though. If you don't, you just go to this menu, you can add the eye, and then just click the eye to show or hide things. So we're just going to hide that sphere for now. All right, back in Blender, I'm going to push Shift-C to make sure my cursor thing is at the center. And then add another sphere, UV sphere. And we can just leave this window hanging out here for now. It doesn't matter. Okay, so what we want to do with this sphere is, with it selected, press Tab to go into edit mode. And then push Alt-A to deselect everything. And that's why I said, you know, if you're in preferences and you're using the 3-button mouse thing, then Alt will behave slightly differently. And there's different things that we're going to do with the Alt key. So if you push A, it selects all, and if you push Alt-A, deselects all. So if you're following this tutorial, I recommend you use the keyboard and mouse. Okay. So now there's 3 different ways you can edit a 3D model. You can edit the individual points of the 3D model, right? Or if you push number 2 on the keyboard, you can edit entire edges at a time, right? So you see that? If you push 1, you're editing the individual points, and you just select a point with left click. If you push 2, you are moving edges at a time. And you can probably guess if you push 3, you can move faces at a time. So we want to push 2 because the next thing I'm going to have you do is with edges. So I'm going to push Alt-A to make sure I have nothing selected. Then I'm going to hold Shift and Alt. I'm going to hold them the entire time. And if you left click, you can see what it does is it selects an entire edge. If I don't hold Shift and Alt, it selects just one small segment. If I hold Alt, it'll select the whole edge. But then if I click on another one, it'll select that edge. So remember, not holding nothing, you can select just one edge at a time. Holding Alt, you can select an entire series of edges at a time. And then if you hold Shift and Alt, what we want to do is go all the way around the sphere, and we want to get every single one of these edges. And basically, are these are longitude lines, right? Latitudes are the ones that go up vertically. I don't know. I can never remember the difference, but basically we just want to go all the way around and get all of these. All right, there we go. And then we want to turn these into seams because we're going to do an unwrap. And seams, if you think of it like clothing, where you have seams that connect, like where your arms go to your torso on your shirt or things like that, we want to add seams so that the computer knows how to basically do this projection where these things are going to be seams. All right, so we have all those. With those selected, we're going to go into the Edge menu, and we're going to choose Mark Seam. Oh, whoops, I accidentally unselected them. Edge menu, Mark Seam, and they'll turn red. That's not enough. What we also want to do is go into Front View with 1 on the keyboard. And then now I want to go into Face mode, so push 3 to select faces. And we want to turn on X-ray mode, which I think is this button. Yeah. I'm trying to remember, because I normally just use Alt-Z, but yeah, there's a button there if you want to use it. Okay, what that means is now you can see through the sphere. You can see the far side, like those dots that look slightly gray. You can see it through the sphere. If we turn X-ray mode off, you see just the surface of the sphere. But with X-ray mode on, you can see the whole sphere. And the reason why we want to do that is if we go to the front view, and then we push B for box select, we want to select those two, and that will select all the way around the sphere. Because if, for example, you don't have X-ray mode on, and you do that, it'll only select the front half of the sphere. And you could go in and hold Shift and like make your way around the sphere. I'm just trying to give you the fastest way. So assuming you have nothing selected, the fastest way is to push 1 for front view, push Alt-Z for X-ray, or use this button, and then just drag out a box, and you have them all. Okay. With those selected, we want to go to Edge and Clear Seam. And then we can turn off X-ray mode, and now we have a shape that looks like this. You can see the rows are all connected in the middle, but then there's these seams that go all the way to the top, which is basically like this. The middle parts are all connected, but then you have the seams that go to the top. All right, so then there's one last thing. Go push 2 to go back into Edge mode. Push 1, select these 2 edges, whoops, and Edge, Mark, Seam. So there's only one seam that goes from the top to the bottom. Okay, so now we're going to move this over here. We're going to switch the window to the UV editor. All right, then we're going to select everything with A in the 3D viewport, push U for unwrap, and then we're going to choose unwrap. And you can see it created the pattern that we want, but, and this is where there's like that glitch that I alluded to earlier, it's not perfect, right? Because for some reason it kind of drifts to the left up here. And I wasn't expecting that to happen. I thought that this would just work perfectly, but it turns out because you're dealing in 3D space, and 3D space are coordinates that use decimal points, right? So it's like you're at 1.4567893333, whatever, round floating point numbers. Computers can only be so finite with that, and the more math that you do with floating point numbers, the more likely you're going to have errors, just because computers can only be so finite. And in 3D space, you have XYZ for every coordinate times hundreds of coordinates. You're going to get rounding errors. And that's not really a problem with Blender, just as much as it's a problem with accuracy in computer science in general, from what I understand. So yeah, it kind of sucks, but just bear with me and hopefully we'll get there. All right, so what we want to do is now in the UV editor, we can move this over. We want to rotate everything. So I'm going to push A to select everything. And I'm going to hit R for rotate 90 degrees. And actually, I want to go up to this thing and say 2D cursor. Then do R, type 90, and then you can see it rotates around where your cursor is. Then I want to do a grab, so G, and then GY1. There we go. And that puts it up there. So basically what that does is if you push R, your mouse can rotate the object, and it rotates based on your cursor. However, if you were to type R and instead of using your mouse type 45, it'll just rotate by a specific angle. Likewise, if you push G, it allows you to grab it and move it around using your mouse. But also, if you push G and then choose an axis like Y and do 0.5, it'll move it by that amount. So basically, I just took them, they defaulted to this, and so what I did, just to recap, is I made it rotate around this cursor, which happens to be at the bottom left. I typed R90, which rotates them 90 degrees. I grab them, I push Y, so they move up and down, and then I push 1. And then now they're in the correct space. Okay, so now what we want to do is basically just line up all these pieces. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in the center. I'm going to select this vertice, push Shift S, and hold it down, and then say cursor to selected. See, it goes right there. Then I'm going to get out my box select tool with B, select all that. Then I'm going to hit S for scale, Y-axis, and 0. And that will straighten out that line of vertices. And I'm going to go here, cursor to selected, box select, all of these, scale, Y, 0. When I say scale, I mean I'm pushing S on the keyboard. Now we'll grab this one, S, Y, 0. The reason why it's 0 is that you're just scaling it to 0, so that is basically the same as aligning them all. And then we'll get rid of those two, S, Y, 0. Now they're starting to kind of run downhill here, so it's going to get confusing, but let's do our best. Box select all of these, box select all of these, box select all of these. This one, SY 0. It's getting really close. I might actually just skip ahead and do this one. So let's, this time I'm going to use C for circle select, SY 0. Let's get this one. So if you push C, you can get this like little circle select thing. And then just escape or right click to cancel, SY 0. And then the last one right here, cursor select, or whoops, move cursor to it. This one I will use box select because I think I can just get in there perfectly. Okay, we're halfway done. Let's do the other side now. I guess I'll start with this one. It's probably easier to work from the outside. Yeah, so I was expecting this to be a single step, but it turned out that because of that floating point error, it really doesn't like unwrapping this. So this is why I kind of decided, you know what, this tutorial is probably too stupid to actually make a tutorial. So hopefully, hopefully we'll get it done, and hopefully you find this useful. But maybe, I don't know. See, I don't know who you are. Maybe you've never used Blender before, and this is going to be the first time you ever use it, and then you fall in love, and then you're like me, and 20 years later you're making Blender tutorials. But I don't know. I love Blender, so I try to get as many people excited about it as possible. But okay, so I think we have that. I think I need to do this one also. Okay, there we go. So now we've fixed that part. Okay, so in this UV editor, what we want to do is create a new image. We'll call this new projection, and this will be your resolution. All right, so let's do 2048 by 1024, which will make it double wide. And then I'm going to put my cursor, whoops, I'm going to put my cursor up here at the top. Actually, I'm going to push N and just go to Tool, View, where is it? View, 2D cursor location. I'm just going to put this at 0, 1, just to make sure it's in the top left corner. We push A to scale everything. And then if I do scale Y2, okay, that doesn't work. It's not quite half. Let's just do it manually. So if you hit scale, you scale everything. But if you push Y, you're just scaling on the Y direction. So I'm just going to bring that close. Doesn't have to be perfect, just to be close. All right, there we go. Actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, No, because that would change the shape of the, if you were to print this, that would change the shape. So actually, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Never mind. I was thinking more about like computer science. Let's just do this with a regular square so nothing weird happens. So 2048, 2048. Okay, there we go. That should be good. All right, so we have this now. So now what we want to do is, we'll call this one sphere target. And what we want to do is make a material for this to accept the texture from the original sphere. One thing I like to do is right click on the sphere and hit shade smooth, which just makes it look nicer. And we can bring back our original sphere as well. It's like hiding underneath it. So if we hide our target, I'm also going to shade that one smooth. But now we have both our spheres. With the sphere 1 target now, I'm going to create a new material. We'll call this, who cares? We'll just leave it default. I'm going to go into shader editor again. And then we're going to create a new image texture. And we can actually just unplug this for now, so it's solid black. And with this one, we're not going to open a file, but instead we're going to create that, what do we just call it? Let's go back to the UV editor. It's just called Untitled. Let's call this, so I accidentally created this one called New Projection, which we're not going to end up using, so I'll just get rid of that. And then let's go to here and call this New Projection, or New Project. Okay, whatever. Back to the shader editor. And then if we choose New Project, I guess we can rename it here also. That should be this image. All right. So let's flip this again. And then open up our shader editor here. All right, so what we want to do is make sure that this node is selected. Click on this camera icon and switch our settings to cycles. It's probably EV by default, but we want cycles. And then we want to select our original sphere and then hold Control and then select the target. So the target should be slightly brightly colored, like it'll have a different color and it'll be brighter, right? So for example, if I have like a cube and I duplicate it a bunch, if you look closely, it's going to wireframe. Like this one is selected, this one selected, this one selected, this one selected, this one selected, but the last one selected is slightly brighter. These are all selected, but the last one is brighter. Same thing in this outliner. These are all selected, but the last one is brighter. Yours might be orange because you're using a different theme than I am. I like teal, so I made a custom theme. But what you want to do is you want to make it so that sphere 1 default is selected first, and then sphere target is selected second. So it is the lighter one. And then make sure that this is selected on. All right, so then if we go to this camera, go to output settings. Actually, no, just the camera. Wait, no. Is it, what do we want? We want... Why is... I should have a lot more settings for cycles. What's going on here? Okay, sorry. I had an add-on turned on which was messing stuff up. I didn't tell you about it in the video because I didn't want to confuse you with add-on stuff. Basically, long story short, I had an add-on. It caused my settings to disappear, but I removed it. Okay, so you choose cycles. You can choose CPU or GPU, whatever. GPU is faster. I'm going to do CPU because my microphone uses my GPU, and I don't want to like slow my microphone down. But anyway, so you select, let's go back. You select your sphere, then you hold Control and select your target so that it's the last one selected. you make sure that this node is selected. You choose cycles. CPU is what I'm using. Render, I don't know if this is the default value, but we could probably do it quicker. We could probably make this 32. Because we're doing a bake, it's not important, so we'll make it lower. But what you want to do is find this bake menu here, and you want to choose emission, and you want to do selective to active. So we want to do the selected sphere to the active sphere target. And then just hit bake. You'll see this little progress bar fly down at the bottom. And now we have converted the texture, and it doesn't look that good. So let's tweak some settings. Why does that look so? I think it's just, actually, we probably should do something higher. Let's try that again. Oh, right. Is that what it's doing? Let's see. So I'm going to make my margin 1. Max ray distance is infinity. Extrusion. I'm not sure. Let's try 0.1. There we go. Okay, so now we've done it. We've basically taken the texture from an equirectangular into that projection pattern. So now if we go to the image menu, hit save as, I'll put this in here, I guess, because that's where it was from. And then now, if I open it up in Windows, we have that. If you want to do it more high resolution, just when you're creating the image texture in Blender, like when you're here and you're saying new image, just give it more resolution here. It'll basically work to whatever resolution that you specify. So we can do that right now. We could do 4096, which is double the resolution. That'll create a new texture. We'll call it foo. Then if we go down to this node and we drop in and choose foo, make sure this one's selected, then this one. Select the texture, make sure the texture is selected, and then hit bake. And it'll be a lot slower this time, but it will eventually work. And it's just slower because it's a much larger image. Wow, so this video, unedited, we're at 28 minutes. So hopefully this made sense to you, and that I did a good job explaining it. But there's a lot going on here that the average Blender user. So now this is double resolution from what I started with. So this is pretty much how you do it. So then, yeah, you can just go to image, save as, and then it already has the name you gave it in Blender. So if you hit save there, then now we have this one and this one. This one is lower quality, although they both look pretty good. And this one's higher quality. No, I had it backwards. This one's higher quality. This one's lower quality. But yeah, so that's how you do it. But like I said, like this is a very complicated program, and knowing even a lot of people don't even who are familiar with Blender don't even know how to use the bake menu. And the fact that there's some weird idiosyncrasies about how Blender works. Like, I'm pretty sure if you don't have this selected, it doesn't work. Let's try it. Okay, maybe it will. Maybe they changed that. I don't know. I've been using Blender for so many years that I'm used to glitches that used to exist. There used to be a thing where you had to have this node selected in order to work. It might still be the case. I don't know. We're going to see what happens after this finishes. But maybe they fixed that now. I'm not sure. But yeah, there's like a lot of weird things. Like you have to set up 2 spheres. You have to do a very weird unwrapping job on the second sphere, the target. And then you have to do a bake. Yeah, I'm not sure if that actually worked or not because the image was already there. Because the thing that's possible is you could have 2 different images here. And then if you hit bake, how does it know which one you want to bake to? I don't know. It's a weird process, but basically that's what happens. So now if we were to hide our, well, let's just put them side by side. And this is all extra stuff. We've already completed our goal, right? So here is sphere 1. We'll move that over there. Let's turn on material preview. So this is the one that came default with Blender. And then if we choose our new one, it's black because we don't have anything wired up. But if we take our texture that we just created, put that into base color, connect this to surface, you can see that it works. Now it has these seams, which that's where they'd be glued together in real life. That could be prevented by, if we select this one, deselect this, select this one, go into baking, and then if we give it margin, do like 8 pixels, and then bake, that will get rid of that, and you'll see what it does. Right now we have perfectly sharp edges on the picture. But due to how computer graphics work, sometimes it wants there to be like a little bit of a bleed. Like if you know anything about like 2D illustration print media, like if you're designing like a card or a brochure or some like kind of sign, there's usually what's called a bleed margin, where basically you actually make your graphics go beyond a certain threshold so that when the machine goes to cut your business cards or your brochures or whatever, it's actually cutting through part of the picture. And that makes it go right to the edge. It's called a bleed margin, where you deliberately go past the edge of the page. Well, 3D graphics has something like that as well, which works for textures. And did that do anything that looks like the same texture? I don't think that did anything. Let's choose this one. It worked the first time. Why is it not working now? Let's put this back at 32 so it goes faster. Oh, you know why? Because I need that. Oh, right. These have to be on top of each other. All right, like that. There we go. Okay, so now you can see that instead of coming to a point, they kind of like continue. And it's more obvious what's happening down here. Like you can see the ground texture, and then it does this like thing where it kind of continues. And so what it's doing is it's creating a margin of color. Like this crack stops right here and connects to the image over here. But what it does is like algorithmically it extends the crack like just outwards. And then so now if we were to plug this in, those seams will have gone away. So that's just like an issue with like computer graphics and how they work, but it's not important. That's not part of the tutorial. At this point, I'm just rambling talking about computer graphics. But here is the projection that we started with, and then here's the projection that we just made. And they're basically the same. The reason why there's some light there is because we'd have to delete this, go into shader, add an emission node, wire that up. There we go, and got rid of that. So yeah, I mean, the process works. We basically went from this image projection to this image projection, and on a sphere, they look identical. Like they both work. But the process to get there is unfortunately not that straightforward. All right, that's it for now.